Hello, my name is Brent McCune, and I will be moderating the question and answer session this afternoon. On behalf of today's sponsor, the Olathe Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank the participants for agreeing to be here today and to promote the Olathe effort, which is focused on educating Chamber members and the business communities about what will be discussed this upcoming session in Topeka. The format for this video session will include a 1-minute opening statement by the candidates, followed by a question and answer period. Candidates will be asked prepared questions on business-related topics, and candidates do not have any prior knowledge of specific questions. They will also be asked to limit their responses to 2 minutes, and the session will conclude with a 1-minute closing statement. I'd like to introduce Senator Julia Lynn. She is seeking to retain her Senate seat in District 29. And now I'd like to ask our candidate for a 1-minute opening statement, and if you would, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what distinguishes you between you and your opponent.
Hi, I'm Julia Lynn, and I'm your state senator. I've been serving in the Kansas Senate since 2006, and I've enjoyed it greatly. The thing that I love about serving in the Senate is that I get to represent Johnson County, and that's why I'm running. I care about what happens in Johnson County because I grew up here, and my husband and I have lived here our whole married life. Our kids grew up here and they went to school here. And I care about and understand what issues impact Johnson County in the Kansas Senate.
So let's begin with our question and answer session. I'd first like to start off talking about budget situations in Kansas. For the past several years, the legislature has faced difficult budgeting choices, and for now our economic future remains uncertain. If Kansas were to face another significant revenue shortfall, how would you support balancing the budget? And if you could, be specific as you can. For example, if you support prioritizing services, what are your priorities and what would you cut? And if you're proposing to eliminate inefficiencies and waste in state government, how do you expect to find that savings?
What you have to do when you're dealing with looking at cuts, because unfortunately our budget has grown exponentially over the past 20 years. And what we have done is we've literally spent ourselves into a treacherous situation. For example, we have grown public sector jobs to the extent that it now takes 12 private sector jobs to pay for one public employee. Now, that just doesn't include their wages. That includes contributions to their capers, and it includes contributions to health care. We now have a $14.9 billion budget shortfall in our public employee retirement system. So one of the ways we're trying to create some consistency and create some efficiencies is to shift that budget shortfall into a private sector focus. In other words, what we would do is change from a defined benefit program to a defined contribution, much like people do in their regular jobs. If we can get to that point, and we made a few steps last year to get there, it's not there yet, but that is probably the most significant place where we can find some efficiencies.
Question number 2 deals with education in Kansas. And as you know, quality public education has been a cornerstone in Johnson County and our economic prosperity. What are your views on the current state of K-12 education funding in Kansas? And how should the legislature proceed on this issue? And would you support vouchers in Kansas?
Well, you know, education funding has been an issue in Kansas for years. And one of the problems that we have is we've allowed a court to tell us what we need to spend on education funding. In other words, that was taken out of the legislature's hands. Now, what we've been doing since we had to add $1 billion more into education, we've had to look at how that money's being spent. And I don't think that we've done a very good job tracking that money through a huge bureaucracy to make sure it gets to where it really needs to be, which is in the classroom for the students. Vouchers, I think, would be a good idea in situations where you have extraordinary children, whether it be kids that are bright and need some acceleration, or kids that maybe need some help. We've seen this a lot with our kids with autism, and I've worked very hard with our autism legislation that we've been trying to get passed over the years. And there are lots of innovative programs and innovative technologies that are out there for these specific kids. I have no problem giving those kids a voucher or choice, giving those parents the choice if their child needs something extraordinary, that they're able to do that. So the money in that case would follow the child.
Our third question, we'd like to ask you, what are your views on the current state tax policy?
Well, when we came in 2010 with the new administration, we had less than $500 in our state budget. Now, most families and businesses couldn't figure out a way to get there in the first place, because most people understand that you can't spend more than you're taking in. And what we have done the past 2 years in the Senate, and what I've been involved with, is looking at ways to increase the money that people get to keep in their pockets. Because in order to grow an economy, you've got to put cash back into people's pockets. And that's why I was on the ground floor and helped pass the most historic tax cut we've ever had in Kansas. And that includes a 1% tax rate across the board, where every wage earner in Kansas will see 1% more in their take-home pay. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but when you consider that most families are struggling right now, that 1% might buy additional things that their family need, or maybe they want to put that into a savings or apply that to something special like an education account. So that's important. The second thing we did was we created a small business accelerator. And what this does is, recognizing that small business makes up 75% of our jobs here in Kansas, we need to make sure that they are healthy. So we cut all taxes on their non-wage income, with the idea that they would either put that into increasing their business through maybe purchasing equipment, or maybe that would mean they would have money available to hire more people to help them grow. The idea is you have to get money flowing in this economy. What has happened over the past several years is that we have lost jobs to states that have zero income tax. So obviously we need to look at our tax policy to make sure that we're competitive. And secondly, we need to look at efficiencies in government, because you can't just lower taxes without cutting spending. And so what we're looking at, and what we have been looking at, is what are the effects of some of the federal budget cuts that we know are coming? How can we brace ourselves so that we protect the services that we need to provide, our core services, our transportation, our education, roads, bridges, the frail elderly, disabled, all of those things. So you have to look at things in terms of the whole, not in terms of specific programs that maybe we need to look at that would eliminate overlap.
Another important topic in recent legislative sessions has been illegal immigration. How do you believe Kansas should proceed, if at all?
Well, as you know, illegal immigration is a failed policy of many administrations. Illegal immigration is something that is wrong, and it's because our federal government has failed. Now, as you know, a lot of states have tried to fix the problems for themselves. We've attempted to do that. My big concern with immigration is the illegal part, because that's wrong. Now, you have to look at the legal aspect of immigration. We welcome that. Everyone welcomes that. That's how everybody got here. So what we need to do is to make sure that our policies are set up so we can capture those illegals that might be here for criminal purposes. We also need to look at policies to make sure that they're paying taxes into the economy. And thirdly, we can't punish businesses if they accidentally hire an illegal. A lot of these workers and these families create huge economic pluses for us in Johnson County. And I believe we can come to a solution that we can save tax dollars, because a lot of these children are in our schools, a lot of them are using our hospitals. I would never ever turn those kids away. We need to come to an agreement on what we're going to do that is not only humane but also efficient.
And now our final question. Recently, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the federal health care reform law that requires states to either implement their own state exchange for selling health insurance or be required to use the federal exchange. Do you support the passage of a state exchange in Kansas?
Well, first of all, I was one of the sponsors of the initial legislation called the Healthcare Freedom Act. And what that legislation would have done is to put the question on the ballot, a constitutional amendment that we could opt out of Obamacare, and that would be giving that question to the people: do you want us to participate or do you not? Unfortunately, that really didn't make it through the Kansas Senate. There were multiple times that we tried to get that legislation through. We failed. The answer to that question is we are in process of bracing for some huge cuts in our Medicaid dollars. And we're doing that by creating a new system called CanCare. And will it have some hoops to jump through? Yes, it will. But the bottom line is we simply can't afford to rely on the federal government for these kinds of dollars. We already have some things in place right now with our exchange, and I think we've been careful that we protect Kansans from the possibility that if we don't have an exchange, at least starting to be put in place, that we would be at the mercy of the feds creating an exchange for us. So I think it's important that we not embrace the idea fully, that we take some steps, and we also obviously need to wait to see if the law gets repealed.
That concludes our question and answer session. I'd now like to ask the candidate, if they would, to take 1 minute as a closing statement.
Well, as you cast your vote this fall for the Kansas Senate District 9 election, I would ask you to consider, is it more important for Kansas to move forward with jobs and job creation? And is it important for you to be able to keep more of your own money so you can spend it and invest it the way you would like? Or is it more important that we keep increasing the amount of money that we put into our government? In other words, increasing the size of government. Because we have learned over the past 20 years that model doesn't work anymore. We have to think a little bit differently now about how we go forward. And I would ask you to consider, is the free market economy something that you think that has brought our country to the place where it is? I would imagine most of you probably do. And so I would ask you, think about the future of your family in a state that is healthy and robust, with jobs, and where your kids can graduate from one of our fabulous state universities and actually find a job here in Kansas, because that's what I'm about, and I ask for your vote.